We are live.
We're live. All right, cool.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone that's tuning in for a late night edition of Fear and Loathing in the Windy City. I am your host, Jose Requena. I'm joined here today with a co-host and a friend of the show, Ali Alexandra. Ali, would you like, a lot of our audience knows you, but people that are checking on the episode might be brand new. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hello, everybody. I'm Ali Alexandra. A lot of you probably do know me from seeing me in the chat a lot on HLM. So I am originally from Northwest Indiana, which is kind of why I came on today, because we're going to talk about Mayor Pete. But I've lived in Chicago off and on the last 12 years. So I've been living here full time for the last year or so. But really something a lot of you know that I dabble in a bunch of different jobs, like different industries, but something I've always been very interested in is, of course, corruption and accountability. Luckily, there's a lot of that in Chicago, but then definitely a lot of that also goes on in the city of South Bend, which I have some experience living in years ago and working in. So that's why this story about Pete was interesting to me, because he's definitely not the guy that he seems. So yeah, that's me, but I'm happy to be here. So thank you.
Thanks, Ali. And yeah, I mean, so you're familiar with South Bend. Were you there when Pete first got elected? Mayor Pete?
I was not. I had some friends that lived out there, and my dad actually was active in politics. He always has been active in politics in Indiana. It's definitely a different climate than it is in Chicago. But he actually was one of Pete's first donors. However, since then, his mind changed a lot about Pete. So I was not there when he was first elected, but I visited semi-frequently over the years. So I've seen what has happened in South Bend.
Very cool. Well, with that, you had a story that you wanted to start with. I thought I'd just let you go for it.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. We talked about Jordan Sheraton, the status coup. He posted a tweet recently about the demolished 1,000 homes in South Bend, in mostly Black and brown parts of South Bend. And really, he kind of touted Mayor Pete kind of touted that as a project that he was very proud of. So, I mean, most of you obviously know about Pete. I'm sure he has some good intentions. I don't know if anybody's read his book. I'm a nerd, and I wanted to see just what he said. So he's got a very distant view of the world and how it works. He has, from his perspective, lots of good ideas, but he's a very data-driven person. So we've seen a lot of politicians that go by those kind of McKinsey-type studies where they lay out city plans for people, but they're not really talking to the people that live in those communities. Obviously, we have a ton of that in Chicago. So Pete came up with this 1,000 homes plan that was basically going to demolish or redo, have people that lived at these houses redo their homes just to make the neighborhood look nicer. But it couldn't have gone any worse, quite frankly. So a lot of what happened as far as how the city even decided to pick and choose where they were going to do this was dependent on a lot of zoning. And if you've ever been to South Bend, I don't know, have you been to South Bend, Jose?
I've been to Gary, Indiana. I've spent some time on there. I'm just going to show people a little bit of the art here, but yeah.
Yeah, so Gary and South Bend have similar issues. It's just like any other Rust Belt city that, was once booming because of factories, and then eventually they were all sent overseas, a lot of those jobs. So you were left with tons of people without employment, and just, one by one, things have gone south. So Pete grew up in South Bend. There you go. So if you want to pull up these articles, there we go. Mm-hmm. So one of his main projects, I'll start here actually. There's so much to say about him and what he's done in South Bend, so it's hard to focus. So one of the things that he was very, very invested in was, if you want to stay on this article actually and go down a little bit, I can talk about this. He touted what he's done to South Bend as it's back. But again, like I was just talking about, that city has really been going downhill for decades. Anywhere that you come into the city, it's run down, vacant homes, homelessness problem that's, really not been dealt with. And part of this plan, again, was just to improve the neighborhood. So their school of thought is that if we make it look nicer, just better things will happen. That never happens. So really what happened was that a lot of these homes, because of different ordinances, different loopholes that the city, in conjunction with these private developers, came up with, were ways to get rid of homes without actually knowing who owned the homes. So if the home was just abandoned for 30 days and it wasn't worked on for 90 days, I believe, they would just take it down, and they never replaced it with anything. So the lot just sits there. I've done some more research, and it is in the show notes. There's a long PDF of this plan that he had. And basically, that's the point. People are saying, well, you're not replacing it with anything, but that's the point, because eventually what the city is going to do, they'll own all of this land, and then they can get it out to their private developer friends. And that's what's already kind of happening in South Bend around Notre Dame. Notre Dame is obviously the crown jewel of South Bend. It is a beautiful campus. But the stark contrast there kind of represents everything in South Bend, because you have these beautiful campus dorms, you have apartments, townhouses that all these, cater to young professionals and obviously students and professors. Then literally a street or two behind it, you have, it's terrible. And so it's just that the stark contrast there has been like that for decades. And so really a lot of the people living in South Bend were a bit surprised and taken back, I would say, when they found out that he was running for president, because he can't even manage his own town. And he's kind of the type of politician that, a lot of the typical liberal loves. He makes things sound good. But so it's a long read.
Yeah. Long read. A lot like Ron Emanuel without the Chicago personality. In terms of impact.
Exactly. It's the same type of approach to managing the city. Yeah. So if you look at these,
the deep state, the oligarchy, the aristocrats. Mild-mannered suburbanites. Sorry.
You're fine. And the thing about Pete that I really kind of found off-putting is that, and a lot of people that live in South Bend have said this, that he's just not approachable. So a lot of residents would try to talk to him, or even journalists, like the status coup, his page and his just him in general, he was actually censored. He had some issues with the Mayor Pete's campaign. So he's very slick in how he operates, as you know. And basically, just my biggest problem is that he won't really he's not the type to get out on the ground with people and actually find out what's going on. So in a lot of other reasons, again, it's kind of like you said, just like Rahm Emanuel, that Obama style, where we're all just making connections, backdoor deals, but we're making it look shiny and pretty on the outside.
Well, Obama spent the whole year community organizing, actually, is what I heard. So that's why he gets to talk down to people that have been organized in Chicago for decades.
Exactly. Exactly.
So Pete, very out of touch, very macro-centric, very money-driven. Really more about the environmental. When I say environmental impact, I don't mean the actual environment. I mean the change of landscape that he can, think is a statue to him. Just thinking about what city mayors think. Sounds exactly like the kind of guy K Street wants to run for president right away.
Exactly. Right.
Has there been any talk about running a train? Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. For some reason it froze. Would you ask me the question again?
Sure. Has there been any talks about running a train from South Bend to Chicago, like a new super train? Because all this talk of Ron Emanuel getting there and Pete's in the wings, and I know Chuy Garcia wants this. It just seems like, I always say gentrification takes look at this. This is from 2013, and this is already a plan that had a lot of pieces come together into one document. Gentrification takes decades to plan. Right. And you have an Amazon privatized little train to take you two at a time, from watching the Bears game to watching the South Bend game. And as you said, it doesn't seem like there's any prioritizing of the human beings that are here in this space, that are existing in the space right now. Right. It's about beautifying the space for new human beings that have money and resources, I think Ron Emanuel calls them better human beings.
Yes.
Call it, it's for them to come and enjoy the playground that Obama and all the money and his friends that, they usually rely on Madigan, but for some reason they're going to try to push him out, and that's going to go totally fine, I'm sure. That's gentrification in Chicago. It's changing the environment for future buyers, future investors. And one of the things that I take personally about the effects of gentrification is that one of the things that you need to do to the people that are there right now ahead of time, and then also afterwards, is demolish their history and any sense of importance or connection they have to that place, any sense of love or community, any sense of growth, any sense of ownership to that land. No, has to completely be eradicated from the sentiment of the people who they're saying they're going to save. You know, and I used to give Obama the benefit of the doubt that he wasn't smart enough to actually understand that, these money people were not going to use Silicon Valley to improve democracy, but instead destroy all of our lives. But now I think that he gets it and he's like, oh, well, that's going to
happen. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's exactly the same thing about gentrification, like in Chicago versus South Bend. The thing with South Bend is that a lot of deals have been going on for decades. There's obviously that establishment machine, and then Pete is kind of the golden boy. He definitely did get some pushback, and there's a bit of a rift in South Bend based just on talks I've had with my dad in the past, from the older style Democrat versus this new kind of very, very corporate-y. I don't know. There's 3 different types in my mind. I'll go into that another time. But Mayor Pete is really just like the perfect golden boy for South Bend. And, he's the type of politician when things are bad, you're not really going to be able to talk to him. You're not going to hear much from him. Like a lot of the things that have gone on in South Bend with the police. They've had horrible racial issues in South Bend with the police. He's not really around for that, or he'll talk about it a little bit. He'll talk about it when it matters. But when things are going well, he's all about it because he wants that. South Bend is a stepping stone for him. It's not his. If he really cared, he would just talk to the people that live there. You don't make a plan, like you just said, this takes decades to plan. You don't just go by, make these decisions by data only. Yes, in the consulting world, that's great. But when you put these actual plans, these 80, 100-page reports into action, you really hurt people. And he's, for example, the water crisis in South Bend is also terrible. Lots of lead problems. They don't do anything about it. It's all about bringing in those private developers that they try to mask as like they're working with community organizations when the actual organizers are ignored. So it's just, I like that the coverage of Pete is still ongoing as far as who he really is. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt in that I'm sure he wants South Bend to do well. He wrote all about how he couldn't believe that, the middle class had been hollowed out back in the day. But at the end of the day, like, you can't solve problems with humanity unless you're either willing to actually get out on the ground and be around those people and try to learn and not just basically objectify them, I feel like, just for your own political gain. And you just have to realize that sometimes a data-driven plan is not going to work out. People in South Bend don't need smart streets. They've invested millions into that. It's almost like South Bend's kind of like a testing pool for some of these different policies that I've been reading about. So yeah, there's tons of information that I have got in the show notes. But yeah, he's a progressive. I like to. It's one of those.
You mentioned a little bit a democratic civil war of different types, especially within the old guard. A lot of my, I don't really think that this show succeeded in doing what I wanted it to do when I started it in December last month. I was freaking out about the UK elections. I was freaking out about Chicago. I was freaking about the US elections. I was freaking out about a lot of things. But ultimately, the idea is that these, like Pete Buttigieg is trying to entice outside capital to invest in South Bend. So he's beautifying the surface of it, but as you said, the water still has lead. There's a homeless problem. There's vacant homes, and people there have not been seeing an improvement on their quality of life. The same could be true here. It could be said here in Chicago. The people that are still here have made it through, but we have seen huge population losses, which goes back to my original thesis with the problem with urban planning in Chicago, is that the whole Chicago metropolitan area from Kenosha down to South Bend is a focal point for global development real estate. That no, they're not going to do anything about climate change, and they have some of the largest freshwater preserves on the planet here in Lake Michigan. And if they just beautify this town and make it so expensive that the poor people have to move out, by the time they fix those pipes with so that their water is lead free, a whole new group of people that are living in an area of the earth that is completely safe of tornadoes, of earthquakes, and some of the worst climate disaster for the people that are architecting that same disaster in Obama, Ron Emanuel, and Pete Buttigieg. So that's my issue with gentrification, that it's planned that long. If that's how you make money off of real estate, then it shouldn't be a real industry, in my opinion.
Right. Like, just be honest. That's just my thing. I mean, that's why sometimes I joke, like, with the GOP half the time, they'll tell you like what they're going to do to your face. But a lot of these Democrats, it's more, we're going to smile at you and we're doing all these good things for everybody. But we don't care. And I hate to be so cynical, but I don't really know what else to make of it. The gentrification in Chicago, and there is, of course, we want neighborhoods to do better. My biggest issue with the gentrification in Chicago that we've seen for decades, obviously, and not in South Bend, is that, like you were saying before, it really erases the culture of the people who made that neighborhood what it is. And they only really care about it because of the proximity to downtown in Chicago. So it's just, and then they'll take down actual history and then replace it with a replica of some kind of cultural monument that would have been there decades ago. It just doesn't make sense. And I hope at least that more and more people are really becoming aware of, like, okay, this is not really, like, this is not a culturally diverse neighborhood. It's a fabricated part of the city planning. So there's so much content on that. And just, I mean, you're from Little Village, correct?
Little Village, yeah, that's where I grew up. Grew up around the Pilsen area, a little bit. Southwest side of Chicago was historically very Lithuanian and Polish. It became Mexican throughout the 70s, mostly because of labor abusive purposes. But this whole area of Chicago has become pretty working class Latino, whereas like the Northwest area of Chicago, also very Latino, that is gentrifying much quicker because that real estate is just much more valuable. So also, just as an aside, Latinos in a city as racist as Chicago, that codified into law, Greeks and Lithuanians and what you call Italians living separately from Black and Puerto Rican and Mexican people. I mean, that was codified into Chicago municipal code at one point. Like not even 100 years ago. So a city this racist has used the Latino population to kind of as a barrier between Black and white identity, political issue, which is another thing that when people decry, oh, I hate identity politics. Are you from Chicago? Have you lived here? How it's used against us every day? Just when you wake up, you're going. It's there. So people that are like, we have to get rid of it. It's like, well, you should have started about 100 years ago when things were going into law. But what do you think is the breakdown between the Democratic Party civil war? Because I mean, Ron Emanuel with his Obama, aura coming into Chicago did shake things up. Old people like Burke and Madigan ended up splitting in a lot of ways because of their ways of dealing with him, even though they were always thick as thieves.
Right.
So I do feel like it's like a Mexican standoff in the Democratic Party right now. People really need to understand that.
Yes, that's what I've been finding that very interesting lately. I hate to say it, I saw it coming, but I think a lot of us saw that coming. And I like to think of Illinois as a bit of like a microcosm for the Democrat Party as a whole, because a lot of the corruption's so obvious here in the state. We've just accepted it, like it's just fine. But I think that what's going to be really interesting, I expected a lot of progressives to obviously call out Rahm once, now that he's back. Yay. Maybe. I expected that, but what's interesting and probably will be interesting to see as it goes on is how that's going to continue kind of guiding the narrative as far as the establishment Democrats, even in the city, versus progressives. I will be interested to see what happens when with everything with Madigan, as far as the support that he's going to get in Springfield. Because there are people that are going to vote against it. And it's just really interesting because honestly, I add in the third component of the Democrat Party, which is kind of like a Lori Lightfoot. I don't consider her a machine Democrat. I don't consider her all the time a true progressive. I might, not everyone will agree with that, but that's just me. I know that she actually, in a weird way, reminds me a little bit of Mayor Pete, where there's a completely different outside, like data-driven obsession almost that guides their policy. They always talk about it. There's keywords that both of them use frequently. And I will be interested to see how that group is going to go as the establishment of Democrats really are out. I mean, Madigan, sometimes I think that everybody actually wants Madigan around because he's the boogeyman that everybody can blame. Like what is the GOP in the state going to do without Madigan? That's the only thing they've been working on. So,
honestly, the GOP, I know that people on the coast have a different take with the Democrats. I know they're crooks. They work with Republicans up close in Illinois. But all of the people, the voters, are very tribal. I don't think that people are more proud of their red or blue jerseys than they are in Illinois. And it's like, but everybody knows that everyone plays together at the top. So it is like the weirdest fiefdom. And the thing is that the GOP having nothing in Illinois. I mean, Madigan seems like he's taking this like some kind of psychotic samurai, like mobster samurai. It's just like, oh, okay, you think I'm corrupt?
Right.
Okay, whoa.
Right. It's like, I don't know.
And then they were really banking on Trump, but this is also like the leading state of like the never Trump movement. So like, Obama's politics, so like it is kind of nice that the Republicans are so in the wind they have to depend on the Democrats for like the boost, and we can see more of that up close. But we had a couple stories, but we can focus a little bit more on Madigan here. This story talks. He's in a lot of trouble for a lot of things, but he's also always been invincible.
He is. It's amazing.
It's a little spooky, a little bit. And it seems like the top level Democrats have shied away from him. Even people in the House have signaled that they'd be cool with him going and they'd be down to replace. Like, I want to be his replacement. Illinois is pretty good about that. I always feel like we are like the most honest pirate council out there. Like someone's like dying and everyone's like, well, who's gonna steal their stuff? And but Madigan, like even the news, even Illinois Policy Institute is like just watching him like quietly like watch everything that's going on, nod and pick up the phone. And that's a terrifying power that he can just pick up his phone, and all of the Democrats in Illinois are like, no, we don't want to get rid of him.
Yeah, no comment. Like exactly.
And the thing is that the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, everybody that considers the Cosa Nostra anti-American and want to pin it on him, and the entire Democratic Party is all spying and watching him and trying to hang everything and spookiest Irish gangster in the goddamn world.
I mean, he is the most like old school, in my opinion, one of the most old school styled. It's, you know, the Chicago way, to reference John Cass. I mean, really, the Chicago way. You barely hear him speak. He doesn't come out much. He's not tweeting. He's hardly making public appearances. And the man holds, I would say, more power than, in most cases, the governor of the state. Honestly, I mean, yeah. Let's just be honest here. I mean, Pritzker going out there and, you know, saying Madigan should step down or answer to this. I have my own thoughts on Pritzker, but let's just be honest here. Madigan controls everything. He has controlled everything. And, you know, it's like so many bills I think about have gone to the Rules Committee, and that man has just prevented a million. I mean, he wields so much power. I don't think people in the United States, I mean, they don't really understand it. They don't have a clue because the Chicago press corps protects him. They'll do like an expose on Madigan, but it's like, it just talks about essentially what's already like legalized bribery, legalized backdoor deals. Like anything that I think the press talks about with Madigan is stuff that he's completely fine with being out there.
Oh, yeah.
The man is just, it's fascinating. He really is fascinating to me because, you know, I watched his documentary. Oh, wait, what were you going to say?
I'm sorry. Like, you know, I go on a big brouhaha about how Dick Cheney built a global Roman Empire. But the domestic Roman Empire that has been really antagonistic to that has been Madigan. You know, like I see Cheney and Madigan as equals. Like for the obsessiveness of power that they have.
Yeah.
It's like Cheney was loyal to serving power. Madigan was loyal to cultivating power for himself. And both of them were very graceful in how they shared power, that they completely receded into the background. You know, and, you know, like I'm still talking about Dick Cheney, but even during the War on Terror, when he was at his most powerful and terrifying, you know, it was George W. Bush that the whole world was looking at.
Right. Madigan.
You know, but Madigan too, like, you know, everybody was looking at Daley, but it was Madigan and Burke. And really the fallout, and we'll get to Burke, between Madigan and Burke was Burke controls Chicago, Madigan controls the Illinois Democratic Party. Which one's more powerful? Well, Burke also has the cops, so
yeah,
for more. We'll see.
Right, exactly. And the last thing, you know, just about Madigan with everything with ComEd. So I believe tomorrow there are four different indictments, and I believe that's actually going to be in court tomorrow. I believe. I have to find that source later, but I was listening to a podcast earlier, so that will be interesting to kind of see how things go down now that more of his associates, close friends are going to be charged. They'll obviously have discovery of different documents, so we'll see what comes out. To be honest, I think Madigan's going to get out of it. He always does. I will be stunned if he does. And honestly, let's say that Madigan goes away. You know, they find it, you know, like he ends up being charged, et cetera, indicted, charged, et cetera. The corruption that he has fostered, the backdoor deals, you know, that old boys club style of politicking will be here for decades. You know, so in that way, I do give Lightfoot credit for at least coming in and trying to stop that. I mean, I really, because even people like Preckwinkle in Chicago, you know, she's obviously hand in hand. They're all friends. They're all friends. And there's just this old school way of politicking in Chicago that I don't think is going to go, just even if Madigan goes. And he, you know, he's obviously getting up there. I don't imagine him, you know, him being around for too much longer. I'm not, you know, not like wishing anything on the man, but I think it's time to go home. He's been around forever.
He was only sticking around for redistricting. That cycle. Yeah. He was only sticking around for after the census so that he can set the game board in his image and it can live on in his retirement. Cycle. Yeah.
The power.
Browner, the Koch brothers, the Illinois Policy Institute, Obama and Rahm, and then Donald Trump and all of the FBI, all the King horses and all the King's men have been on this guy since 2010, and he's walking out after the census with redistricting and being like, try to touch me.
Right, exactly.
I honestly hope, I had been hoping they had more on this guy, but the fact that the Republicans want to make a spectacle, a politically driven spectacle like they did with Hillary, in the hopes that that would just remove him from the House as Speaker, like man, that is some weak ass shit, GOP, and that's who is going to gentrify my neighborhood and tell me to give both sides the chance and not to be so partisan. Like, they can go to hell.
Yeah, like, exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. The GOP, I swear, they really do. I think that they secretly love Madigan a little bit because it gives them, for their own base, cover. It gives them cover. Well, we're still working to fight Madigan. Like I said, actually, months ago, I said, I like to play the devil's advocate a lot. Honestly, if there were ever a great time to rebrand as the GOP, especially in Illinois, it would be now. And just if they were smart, because you've got like you're going after voters that literally don't even know who Madigan is, or like they were born like far after the man has been in power. So I just think he's like the ultimate boogeyman for the GOP in this state, because they can then be like, well, we're working on this. When really that party, I've watched a lot of videos and like follow kind of that side too. I want to know what's going on. And the real, the true conservatives in the state have been pushed out of the GOP, just like progressives more often than not are pushed out of the establishment DNC. So it'll be interesting to see how things go.
This whole region is famous for what used to be called freshwater politics. The rivers, the water. Honestly, anywhere that fresh water flowed, real estate development followed, which made playing business pretty. I mean, honestly, I feel like libertarianism brings its roots because of freshwater politics. And Chicago is a big kind of like thinking hub for libertarian politics that translates both into the GOP and Democrats.
Interesting.
It's how you end up with Rahm and Obama's and Pete Buttigieg's doing the biddings of the overt oligarchy living in downtown Chicago.
Yep.
And Madigan, he got off telling those people, no. He liked to do what he wanted to do. So they didn't like someone that said no. That doesn't mean that he's not corrupt as hell.
Right.
But I don't know that he's guilty of anything that Ed Burke is not guilty of, which is kind of where the fallout with the Republican Party and the Democratic Party for me is accentuated a little bit in Chicago. Like, Burke is one of the longest serving Democrats. He's as blue-blooded Democrat as the Trump family, but he's Trump's property tax lawyer. He's the godfather of the Fraternity Order of Police in Chicago, law enforcement brain, huge mastermind police cop brain. Like, the guy has a cop brain like for all of the Midwest. And they actually have him saying what they want to charge Madigan for. Like, if you help me, I help you. They don't seem like they have anything like I mean, maybe it comes out. That'd be pretty cool. Like, Madigan seems like he's a little bit more careful.
Yeah.
Burke was talking to Solis. Solis was his guy, and we don't see the same like hang him from the GOP because.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. I mean, there's a few reasons, but that's an interesting point that you bring up as far as like the differences. And I would say Burke, I'm assuming a lot of it's like the cop thing. I'm assuming that's why they're not as so after him. But also, there's something about these types of politicians is that, at least these old school types, which is that if you watch or listen to people that live in these actual districts, a lot of the time, not always, but the ones that, Madigan, Burke, they're friends. They take care of each other. That's the establishment Democrat way. You take care of mine, I take care of yours. It's like, that's kind of how, and I think a lot of people are like, well, if I don't donate this, or if I don't support him, we're going to lose all of this. And that's how you have this stranglehold. That's always how politics is. But in Chicago, it's just, I mean, it's like you were saying before, just in the fine print, it's codified. There are so many loopholes that these people create. And, just one more thing about Madigan that people tend to forget is that the property tax law. I mean, the man practices, he'll reassess property taxes. So that's also a huge thing. I think people, they sometimes think, well, I'm going to end up getting, effed if I don't support him. But I'm very curious to see what comes out as far as like with Burke. I think Burke, I don't know. I just feel like some people really show mercy on him, and I'm not sure why.
It's the cop thing. Also, I think that Burke, like Madigan, is very good about giving favors and taking care of people, even people that would hate him. I mean, like one of the first things, Anita Alvarez was like his creation. And then Kim Fox knocked her out. The first thing he does, she's not even in office yet. He throws a huge fundraiser for her at his mansion right by my neighborhood over here. And he's like, I'm one of the top cops. The cops hate you. Take my money and they might go easy on you. He's really good at the gaslighting. Yeah, and not that she would be like, oh no, I don't want money. It's like, but
oh yeah, she took money. Yeah, Kim Fox is. That's interesting. See, that's actually a really good example again of like the establishment versus Kim Fox, which her policies are definitely more progressive minded. Whether they work, not always, but she's from a different school of thought. And so I think, and now that you say that, that's just another way that they're like, well, we'll give them money and they'll go easy on us. They won't expose a lot of what we've done. So and that kind of also reminds me of the relationship that Lightfoot has with a lot of the establishment type Democrats in the city. She knows how they operate. Mm-hmm. She wants them to work with her, but she will call their corruption out from time to time when it's politically expedient for her. So
it's politically expedient.
When it's politically
expedient. The last thing on Madigan for me is just that you're right. Like Tony Preckwinkle works with them. Like they all work together. Like Danny Davis ran for mayor against Jay Daley, and then that's how in 1991, and then that's how he became a congressman in 1996. Like it's that big club, and we're all not in it.
Exactly.
But both Madigan and Burke have the same private business of being real estate lawyers. Both of them became real estate lawyers after they went into office. Both of them have major clients that they save them a ton of money on real estate, on property taxes. And that, affects the schools, that affects our property taxes, that affects all these things. But the problem is that they did most of this crap in the 80s, in the 90s, and in the mid 2000s. Mm-hmm. So now the FBI starts an investigation in 2010 and wants to catch Madigan telling ComEd people, if you don't take care of my people, it's going to be really bad for you. At that point, I don't even know if he ever has to say that ever.
No, exactly. It's just, I don't think so either. And
it's just already understood.
Just to touch on that actually really quick before we move on about ComEd. So that's obviously what I was talking about with everything that's going to happen tomorrow with Madigan as far as what's going to, the people around him being indicted, going up in court. So everything with ComEd, which is just Madigan basically, like easing, he'll say, okay, we'll ease some regulations for you if you just help me out with some jobs. That really, again, is symbolic Illinois and Chicago politics. Again, it's just I'll cut you a deal, we'll let that slide. If you get me 5-10 jobs. I mean, I watched a documentary about Madigan, and it was just talking about the culture of that kind of the jobs, the patronage politicking. And I think that's actually like a foundation that everybody should know more about to understand Chicago politics, where it started. Maybe let's say back in the day, they really didn't have bad intentions. They just wanted to help out their friend. They just wanted to help their friend out. But it has evolved into something beyond corrupt, because when you're giving ComEd and bribery schemes, that's a big deal. And I do have to, the last thing I will say is sometimes I do wonder what the general Chicago population actually knows about its politicians, because the corruption is so blatantly obvious in Chicago and nobody cares. I feel like nobody cares.
No one can do anything. You know?
There's not exactly, but it's like, how long can that go on? So,
I mean, like, I had friends, that were buying heroin all over different parts of Chicago, and the stuff that, they would hear and learn and say, and, from people in passing, like it was normal and understood. It was just like, why doesn't anybody do anything about that stuff? And they're like, why would they?
Exactly. So,
Um,
yeah. Yes.
but
Let's move on.
so I thought this was a good lead off because we went not again. Burke's not in the news other that he's trying not to face his trial, and so we're hearing a lot more of Madigan in the news. But Burke did have a little shine in this story that we do want to talk about more than just him. This week, City Hall passed its budget against the wishes of a lot of grassroots and neighborhood organizers, which socialist aldermen, and generally, the most hard-hit Chicagoans were pretty apprehensive about their property taxes going up with this. One of those leading no votes was also Burke, but I wanted to take the lead on this story because I know you have.
So I think a lot of people were really, everybody's invested in this, but I think more so this year because everyone knew it was going to be a bit of a tighter vote. And Lightfoot, I won't say word for word what she said, but she basically said to a lot of, I think it was the Black Caucus, City Council, like, don't come to me for if you want anything. So it was obviously contentious. Lightfoot and a lot of the aldermen do have some conflicts here and there. But what was interesting to me about this vote were, like you said, the people that voted no. So I never thought I would see the day that Burke and DSA members would be voting the same way. I mean, I was like, is anybody else realizing how weird this is at all? And I mean, it's stunning. I just was like, okay, that's, it's not great when that's happening. They have their reasons, of course, different reasons. But I found that to be the most interesting. So as far as this budget, obviously we know that it's not addressing a lot of what needs to happen in Chicago. And this kind of goes back to some of what Lightfoot is doing as far as allocating funds out in the city. I will give her credit in that she is, a lot of her budget is allocating funds to the South and West Side, which in theory, that's great. However, it kind of, that ties in with Mayor Pete's approach, which is that you have these outside developers that are coming in and they'll be handling whatever is planned for these neighborhoods that have been decimated, some of them since the 60s. They have not been rebuilt, no investment. And you have a lot of outsiders coming in. So in theory, great. So basically what one thing I definitely to start it off was the alderman from Inglewood, that ward, that district, Jeanette Taylor. I think she should run for mayor, frankly, because she basically said, don't give me crumbs, or don't give me crumbs and call it cake, meaning the budget. So as far as like police budgeting, that's still, they hardly defunded the police. If at all. I would say that they're trying, supposedly they're going to do a violence prevention program with all these millions of dollars. But it's like, I'm cynical about it because it's hardly any different from years past in that it's just billions and billions of dollars that, again, why do the taxpayers have to foot the bill for the mistakes that have been made on behalf of politicians that we really have no control over? We have no say over what they do. If we have the people that are the loudest, those grassroots movements are usually, they're given crumbs. So really what I think the most part about this budget is just that the property taxes in the city are high. I think they're the highest in the country, if not the highest. And this is just going to place more of that on all of us. So you're going to keep having people leaving the city. And again, I go back to, like I was saying, Jeanette from Inglewood. She's basically saying, why are we not taxing the corporations that you're bringing in, like Amazon, who's coming in hot? What about them? No, so you're going to put it on the people that are making sometimes less than $25,000 a year. How do you expect that to work out? Like, I genuinely want someone to tell me how they think that's going to work out when a lot of people are already unemployed. The state unemployment, that's a whole other story, that whole system, how well that works. It's just, I understand that the budget needs to be fixed, but why does it fall on the people of Chicago to have to pay for it, especially the ones in communities that have been hit hardest for decades? So, I mean, that's really how I feel about it. Again, and it was interesting to see who voted no. I was very impressed by a lot of the DSA members. I really was, because that's not easy, you know. And Alderman Andre Vasquez from his ward is like Lincoln Square, Rogers Park. That's a diverse. He has a very diverse ward. I mean, I was kind of surprised, like they were done with him quickly. I get it. They were done with him. So I did kind of feel for him a little bit. I don't know if everyone's going to love that take, but I think because he has such a diverse economy in his ward. But I was very impressed with DSA for how they voted and just really standing up to Lightfoot. Be like, no, you said you were going to do these things. You're giving us crumbs. The last thing I'll say about this is a lot of the decisions were made based on a survey. A lot of these, Mayor Pete did this too. It's the surveys that they give out about what communities prioritize as far as where the funding should go. So in Chicago, the lowest topic on the list was police. They don't want more funding for police. But the groups that were asked and used were mainly white communities, which that doesn't make sense to me. I thought that was odd. Again, it shows like, okay, well, what about the people that live in Englewood, that live in Austin? What about them?
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. I'd like to hear yours, actually.
Yeah, CPS Chicago has never prioritized the people that live in those areas of Chicago. They never prioritized the human beings that live in Chicago. I mean, Chicago was founded as a I'm sorry, it was founded as an outpost, which was kind of a nice thing, but then it got gentrified. And it was founded as a huge industrial hub. All the rivers ran here into a onion marsh. Then you had the freshwater lake. After the industrialists kind of cleared out a lot of people from here, they just started building huge industrial centers to then transport through the rivers.
Yeah.
So any human being from anywhere on the planet, if you had nothing on your back, you can go to Chicago and they will put you to work. But that's all that you're really there to do. They're not there to care for you. They're not there to like you. They're not there to help you build a family. If you're poor in Chicago, you're there to work. And I mean, like, that's urban planning. You create a ghetto, you create a slum, you create an area of human desperation so that you always have malleable human laborers for your menial tasks.
Yeah.
That's urban planning. That's Chicago. And that's how they've treated the west and south side of Chicago. Ron Emanuel said it out loud. He'll deny it. His people deny it. But, Chicago's one of those places where who you're going to believe. And it's like, oh, yeah, Ron Emanuel would say that. He's not going to do anything for those kids because they're not going to amount to anything he said.
Right.
Lori Lightfoot ran against him. So I really thought that she was there to undo his legacy. Still looking for that. About this budget, though.
Yeah. Let's talk about the budget.
I'm going to share your sentiment. I feel for Andre a little bit. Yeah, I do.
I really do. Because he's very active otherwise. I mean, they went after him hard.
Really hard. Hey,
I mean, also, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, this is a bit of an off topic, so stop me if you must. I think that I really do like a lot of DSA's ideas. I really do. And because I really am independent, I like to do ideas, not ideologies, but they have a lot of great ideas and they make sense. So when I think some people get a little turned off from it when they see something like what happened to Andre Vasquez. That's all I'm saying, because there has to be a little room for discussion. We're not at that long-term goal yet that, a lot of what DSA is looking for. We can get there, but I think that there has to be a little more room for discourse. And I know a lot of people might not agree with that, but that's just my thoughts on it. So yeah, I kind of feel for him because I know he cares a lot. He really does. He's one of the most involved aldermen. I mean, do you want Burke or do you want somebody like Vasquez? Like, there's a very obvious difference. There was other people, obviously, Brendan Riley, he's the Gold Coast downtown alderman. He voted no. Let's see, Tom Tunney, which is near where I'm at. Obviously, he's voted no. So there were some obvious no's. There were some surprising no's, but the budget itself, how do you feel about it?
I mean, I like that people weren't getting fired. I like the way that Burke wanted. He's like, don't raise property taxes, fire some people. That's a little bit self-interested of me, though, maybe. But I didn't want to see people get fired. But still, I think that if had it been a no vote, it would have been historic in Chicago.
Yeah.
Lori might have had to then go, as Andre says, go to Burke and say, okay, we'll lay off these many people, or we'll do this with cops, or we'll do this or whatever. And progressives, leftists might get even less than they wanted in the budget. But if those had been the optics, they would have been better poised to keep cudgeling her to be a one-term mayor, which I think was always the goal. Whoever helped her become mayor, they were always going to screw her. I don't know who gave her assurances from the grassroots or the ground or the street. They were totally lying to her. Yeah. She was always meant to be a one-term mayor. I don't know why she thinks insulating herself around the rich in Chicago when the billionaire president can't even pull off a coup with his 72 million people right now. I don't know. That's on her. I don't know what she's going to do, but I think she won. She definitely won this week. She could have been poised to be a one-term mayor, and that would have been a huge get for the left in Chicago. They wouldn't have gotten the progressive or leftist in. They would have had a like Rom 2.0 person probably beat the crap out of her. Probably like Ray Lopez would have made some shady deal with shady Latino people that are leftist one day and do Amazon back deals with Burke the other day. Right. But you still like it still would have been a big win for the left if they had stopped her here and there, and then she had subsequently lost. The reason I feel for Andre is because he really was instrumental in giving her this win, and he's not a hero for it at all. So he would like to pose himself as one, and I like the dude all right, but I mean, she would have had the votes without his vote. He could have up for his caucus. He could have done a little Tulsi Gabbard thing and like voted present and like give a long-winded speech or something. Like he could have been a bit savvier. For a guy that is pronounced in how savvy he is. Instead, he just completely capitulated to her. Yeah. And she's not helping him at all. No. As a matter of fact, I feel like she's going to target some of these DSA wards to get rid of and redistricting. And that's going to be his legacy in DSA in leftist politics. If he can't leverage her to go easy on the caucus that he's a part of, which is why when I see on Twitter like people just dunking on him, it's like, yeah, that's fun. I do that, like with people. But I do that with Neera Tadden, who has destroyed Libya, and could care less whether I live or die, if my name's Rich or not. Andre, all politics is local, so I just treat politics locally different. But I do think that DSA exposing what they did. I know your point, and that would be my fear too. Oh no, they're going to, people are going to be turned off by that. Yeah. Moreover, I mean, like, if they didn't have the votes, this was their best move. They had a huge loss and not stopping this vote and making the news and capturing the headlines basically by doing this to Andre. they have reasserted themselves as the power center in the city between the establishment no votes and the fair weather progressives like Lightfoot. So Prasanna Chavan is under attack in Seattle by the Democratic Party and by Jeff Bezos. They're trying to go back through her election, do a recount, and like kind of kick her out of her seat. But I feel like what DSA in Chicago is doing here is following a lot of her influence.
Okay.
And this was a motion to indicate that they're going to keep following that influence. And so I'm hoping that nothing happens to Kashana over in Seattle.
Right.
And she gets to stay on, because definitely Jeff Bezos, I think, has nightmares about her.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, and if we can bring that energy to Chicago, I think Chicago would be better for it.
I agree. I agree, because at the end of the day, like, really do remind me of the fact that there's a lot of fair weather progressives. It's funny because I'm a person where if I believe in something, in all the way, and then yet I'm like, well, but like politically to win people over, was that the best move for DSA? But yeah, because they have to stay true to that overall message. And I mean, if these fair weather progressives are going to be a part of it, that's not a good look for DSA. So I agree with you, and I think Chicago would be better for it. I mean, you really can't argue with anything that DSA is asserting. Can you give people housing? Like, I mean, just think about like the Obama Center, the Obama Library that's going to be built. Like, what a slap in the face, just again, because to a community that's already felt it a million times over. Like, that right there is the epitome of, I think, the establishment Democrat Party. Like, hey, yeah, we want your vote. We're going to do a lot for you. Do you see us? Like, we have your representation and everything. We're going to listen to you. And then the second that they're elected, you don't hear from them. So for the man, to put a library in that neighborhood, like, you have kids dying, and it's amazing to me. I feel like I beat a dead horse about Chicago, but I don't think I'll ever stop, because I just don't understand how it's okay for someone where I live, a little girl, to walk to the park and be fine. If you go 9 miles south, just listen to a police cannon. Not like you'd want to, but you know what I'm saying? It's that the little kid can't even walk outside without maybe getting hit by a stray bullet. So I hate to be so morbid. That's just the reality. That just is the reality. The crime in the city is up. I mean, far more than it's been in a long time. And it doesn't look like it's going away. And obviously a lot of that is fueled by the poverty. And it's just like, I can't really stand these politicians anymore that, like, you want to come in and put a library in the neighborhood. That's great. Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I mean, it'd be great if it was a library. It's a huge presidential center for his archives and golf courses to play golf with, like, the billionaires that live in the Sears Tower and stuff like that, or like over downtown. But it's interesting. I mean, Chicago kids, we've always been the human experiments for the American experiment. Like, if you live in urban America, you are in a test tube. You are being taken notes on. You are a statistic. For them to understand themselves.
Exactly. It's just sucks. So I'll always keep ranting about that.
I want to bring this maybe a little full circle on that note. And I don't want to just keep talking through you. But one guy that has been interesting to me since I was in South Korea for 4 years for all of Obama's first term, and then I came back, and it was really weird because America's a weird place. And then like Donald Trump was becoming president. I'm like, what the hell's going on? But one guy that's been interesting since that time while I've been here has been this dude.
Yes.
Your typical toxic Latino male. I'm also guilty of this, I suppose, but he's an interesting guy because he's from Little Village. He's from my, when I was a kid, Chewy was a hero. I knew about Chewy when I was a kid. Like, he was the anti-machine guy. He was the for the people guy. He was the independent guy. He worked his ass off, and he became alderman of the 22nd Ward. And after being in politics, I'm like, that doesn't make him as nice of a guy as I used to think it would. But he pulled up.
Yeah.
But then he jumped up to be state senator, and then the machine got sassy on him, and they ran someone against him, Tony Munoz, who's like Madigan's right-hand guy now.
Yes.
He's one of his allies in the Senate. And then so Chewy was in the wind for a lot of the early 2000s. He would come back with the help of Tony Preckwinkle to become Cook County Commissioner of basically the Latino neighborhoods that go into Cook County on the southwest side. And then he successfully helped Alma Anaya take his old seat. There was kind of a bit of a Latino civil war going on a little bit there between him and Marty Sandoval. As power players, Marty Sandoval was an ally to Ed Burke, also a police-friendly, politician, basically cultivating a culture of military veterans and police law enforcement families in his neighborhood, all Latino, cultivating a very conservative Latino culture. And very loyal to Ed Burke. Madigan, in the midst of his FBI investigation and seeing Donald Trump coming and seeing Hillary Clinton do whatever it is that she was doing, and I do think that Madigan helped Bernie a little bit, mostly just to scare Clinton, which is something I just live with knowing, but kind of work around. But yeah. But Madigan helped Chewy become a congressman, helped build his little machine. He helped me a lot. And I don't think with any more than the political calculus than Chewy is so antithesis to the politics of Marty Sandoval, who's Ed Burke's Latino guy. I need a dude.
Right.
And I've known Chewy for a long time. I know what he wants. It's not that much at this point. Why don't I just give it to him? Which has led to Chewy being a very powerful background figure throughout all of the 2019 elections, the 2018 elections, the 2018 elections, the 2019 elections, and these elections, which is why if he was Bernie Sanders's #1 guy in Chicago, why did we get our asses handed to us?
Right. Like, what is, something about, you bring up a good point just about the Latino politically active communities in Chicago, like this, like kind of like the Civil War that happened, because there are very, very different. And I'm not like saying like a lot of the establishment Democrats, like after losing a lot of the Latino vote on a nationwide level, we're like, wow, they're actually diverse people. I don't mean it like that, but it's a very tight knit community. I have tons of friends from the southwest side where you're from. I mean, it's just interesting to see that kind of split. So I'm curious I'm going to throw it back to you. I'm curious, what do you think? Because I'm not as privy to Garcia himself as you are. What do you think he's going to do?
What's good for him? And I don't know what's good for him at this point.
Right. We don't know.
Bad in the background. He was someone that was so accessible just 5 years ago. And now it's, he's traveling with Nancy Pelosi to, South America and Central America. And he's talking to Warren people. And then he's trying to push, he's doing all these shady things with Burke. But then he's like stands up for Palestine out of nowhere. And then he gets other people to stand up for Bolivia. And I'm like, what? Look, all I know is that this guy's Chicago machine. And that's you got to take that for what it is. That also means he probably knows the creepy ways to get things done, which again goes back to, why didn't you help Bernie some more, bro? Why didn't you help Bernie some more?
And that makes me believe that he didn't help Bernie. I mean, that actually leads me to believe that he probably, at the end of the day, has a feeling that the more progressive way of operating, I don't think, based on the people he's surrounded himself with, I don't think he thinks that's really going to go as far as it actually is. Like, I don't think he really understands the power that's behind that vote, I'm assuming.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Chewy helped get Lori her vote, even though the Latin caucus was against it, even though DSA was against it, even though progressives were against it.
Yeah.
He's someone that, he waged war on Burke, but through the grapevine, he also understood that Burke was trying to bring the Amazon warehouses, which would have been a lot of jobs in Latino neighborhoods.
Right.
So he's very good about saying the right things about Amazon, but being like, well, let's wait until we get those Latino people their jobs, and then we'll unionize them and talk about taxing Amazon. But let me get mine first, otherwise I can't help anyone. Exactly. And you might call that shady and corrupt. I think most people do, but we call it Chicago, and I think that Chewy can't help but be Chicago. And I don't know what longevity that has anymore in an age where the FBI is looking at every single thing that every single person is doing, and that progressives and leftists want clarity and authenticity and transparency from their leadership. But still, he's got the history.
All of the Chicago, Illinois politicians, as much as I go on and harp about them, they are so interesting because they're really all just, it's a game. We all know politics is a game, but some of them are so brazen about it and they're so open. And some of them, like we were just talking about, have, they can get away with playing both sides without really having to answer for it. So Garcia is interesting to me in that, I'm sure he wants to help out, obviously, his people. He's more, like you said, Madigan, really helped him. So if anything, I see him either, I don't know, I feel like at the end of the day, he's going to do what helps him, obviously, the most. And I don't know, we'll have to see. I think really he's focused on getting more of his people into influential positions. So maybe he's just using this, as a vehicle to get to that point. But I don't know why he wouldn't have, like you say, why he wouldn't have supported Bernie far more. It's interesting. I really thought that Bernie would do a lot better. And like you said, you got their asses handed to them. So I'm not sure.
I think that Michigan flipping for Bernie in 2016 was a huge deal. I do think that in hindsight, some of that was Madigan.
Yeah.
Madigan really runs a lot of the union networks across the Midwest, just because it all comes back to the cheddar, and who's going to bring the headquarters to the Midwest, right? And that's right.
That's what I'm trying to see.
In some ways, it's like, and then Chewy was running against Ron Emanuel in 2015,
that's right.
Which is why Bernie endorsed him, and they got linked up a little, Bernie was an outsider as an independent. I don't think he understood the Democratic Party with the nuances that we're describing it right now.
Right.
He kind of understood Chicago's like this. There's this person. There's the dailies. Ron Emanuel, corporate hack.
Right.
Chewy's got a great resume for a leftist, but he's got the track of a Chicago politician. So I don't know leftism.
There's one more thing I wanted to touch on for this, just because you have it highlighted. I'm just reading a little more closely on here, just about Pritzker and how he fits into all of the mix. I'm curious, before we go, how do you see Pritzker? I'm just curious in general. Because he's kind of another one that he really doesn't get as much attention as I think he should for various reasons. Does anybody remember his call with Blago a couple? Right. Does anyone remember? I'm just saying, he gets away, he gets out of the limelight a lot of the times. And he does things, he's like Lightfoot to me. Sometimes he'll do things I'm like, okay. You're not as much of an establishment as I thought you were. But he is. And he knows the game. He knows the game. And Pritzker always manages to kind of also evade things. So I feel like at the end of the day, we'll have to talk about Blago another time. That's a fun topic, especially the things that he's been doing lately. But I'm just curious what you think of Pritzker and how he fits into all of this.
Yeah. Quick shout out, everyone in the chat, just like Mona Carmona, Carlos Osario, what you call it, Kit Cabela's also there. Mona, thank you so
Oh,
much
cool.
for joining us. Kit says Hardlands Media also interviewed Chuy Garcia in 2018. What you call it, please check out our channel, check that out, check out that interview. JB Pritzker is Chicago, you know, is through and through. He's an oligarch, you know, he's a billionaire. I don't care. I don't care for that kind so much, the billionaires. But the Pritzkers, when you go into the Museum of Chicago History, the museum starts with a Pritzker family tree. That's who the Pritzker family is.
Mm-hmm.
So the word Pritzker, when you might see it in a lot of places. It means different things to different people, but it usually just means power.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also like an old school power, like an old blood, like, oh, we're not racist. We gave Black people jobs here in Chicago.
Money, jobs, and we give them days, and we go march in parades with them. We're good.
Yeah, I can make phone calls and talk about who's civil and who's not. You know, because I'm civilized like that. It's very old blue blooded like that. But I will say about JB that he's always kind of been kind of one of the dorkier Pritzkers. He's got pretty crazy relatives out there that have a lot of power and influence to do really terrible things around the world. He's always been one of those, oh, you know, liberal democracy can save the world. He's someone that would convince Obama that he could just follow those politics, and guys like Pritzker will keep funding him. But I think they're on a different team. But he ran for governor because he wants to be a governor. Like he's a billionaire. He didn't have to do that.
Right.
What I think about Pritzker, though, he's someone that wants the prestige of a civic servant, and he hasn't really. I don't think that the way he handled March and the elections was good at all.
No.
But since then, he's been one of the better governors on COVID. So it's like I hate him for it, and I'm also like, well, you know, you probably save more people than most governors out there.
Yeah, I've found myself like questioning I was like after him. I was like, Pritzker, because I was over the Madigan thing for a while. I'm not gonna lie, because if you've known about it like we have for a long time, it's like eventually you're just like, all right, Madigan. But Pritzker, yeah, it's interesting. Like Lightfoot, Pritzker, they're just kind of anomalies. So, and even Garcia, I just am very curious to see what will happen in the coming weeks.
Well, interesting enough, I mean, like Pritzker is there because of Madigan, but not because Madigan recognized that he needed Pritzker. Look, Pritzker's already throwing Madigan away.
Exactly.
And it's funny that most people in Illinois are like, well, that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
You know, Pritzker needed Madigan. Madigan didn't need Pritzker until he did. You know, and Madigan, I yelled at JB a little bit at a Chuy Garcia event. I was asking him questions, and he was just stumping on the blue no matter. I was asking him about policy, and he's just like, we got to get rid of Bruce Rauner. And Chuy's like, don't you like him? He has money. It's like, it's funny. But you call it Pritzker needed Madigan because the union guys that Madigan has so much pull with would be totally skeptical of a guy like Pritzker. And I think that in a lot of ways, they're the guys that are letting him get away with so much. They would be the guys that would be still on him about his toilet and his property taxes, and would be wagging their fingers about every single little thing. But I think that Pritzker mostly is responsive to any pulls of power, and so, like, people, I mean, like, honestly, Pritzker has a better job of actually becoming FDR than Joe Biden, I would say. If Pritzker decided, you know what, other billionaires, you know what, Jeff Bezos, you know what, Bill Gates, enough, you know, he can pull it off in his lifetime.
He could. He's cool.
Turn into, like, to Michael Bloomberg, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, God, and Burke.
Huey and Lightfoot are all there because of Madigan. Lightfoot mostly because Madigan wanted Preckwinkle, and everyone's like, no, 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 no.
No, yeah, nobody wanted practical. Yeah, it's just, I know, like, I've kind of gone all over about Chicago just because there's so much to talk about. But I think, again, the common thread, really kind of to end this off, is that there is definitely the old guard and the incoming players in the Democrat Party. And obviously, a lot of people who like see me in the chat know I'm really like, whatever. Again, the GOP is the GOP. They'll tell you to your face what they're going to do to you. I love seeing the Democrat Party right now, what's happening as far as progressives going after establishment Democrats, because Chicago is the way it is for many reasons because of establishment Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
I think it's time that progressives actually get a real voice in what's going on, and not the fake progressives like Mayor Pete. Lori Lightfoot still confuses me, but I don't love her lately. She does confuse me sometimes. But my point is that we'll have to, maybe Mike Madigan's days are numbered. They might be, because maybe everybody's figuring it out. Like, they really might be, because like you say, everybody's kind of against him, even from all different angles. People he's helped, people he's hated, the GOP. So it will be interesting to see what happens in the coming days, for sure. That's
Yeah. Well, I was going to say one other thing, but no, I think that's a good note to end it on. Thanks for coming on. I hope we do this again. I haven't been doing consistent shows just because life and COVID, and and I never planned to do this show long term. I know that you've always been interested in Chicago stuff, so happy to keep doing this with you until you want to just keep doing it on your own.
Yes, I would love that. And I hope if people have suggestions, comments, ideas, whoever's watching, I'm not sure because I don't have it up, I would love to. But yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. And let's do it again sometime, okay?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone that was watching.
Everybody.
I'm Jose Requena, Ali Alexandra. This has been Fear, Loathing in the Windy City. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.